He couldn't understand me, so he pushed me to become his ruin. But then, when I finally returned, every road he could have taken had already turned to ash. He couldn't understand me, so he pushed me to become his ruin. But then, when I finally returned, every road he could have taken had already turned to ash. That's not just a line, it's the map of my life, and of his destruction. When people first saw us together, they said we looked like a storm holding hands with the sun. I was the quiet one, the soft presence, the girl who found comfort in shadows because light had always burned her. He was the center of every room. The laughter, the voice, the arrogance wrapped in a smile. And I was just the silence he thought he could mold. He said I fascinated him, said I was different. I never knew that to him. Different meant something to fix. In the beginning, I let him in slowly, like opening a window after years of a locked house. He asked about my scars, the ones I wore outside and the ones buried so deep they had names. But he didn't listen. He only looked like he cared. He'd nod, say the right things, but his eyes wandered past me, as if he was searching for someone else inside my skin. Still, I stayed, because when you've been invisible for too long, even the wrong kind of attention feels like love. I told him about my father, about the nights I spent trying to breathe through sobs that never made a sound. I told him how I hated birthdays, because they always reminded me of who wasn't there. And he said, "You're strong, babe. That's why I like you. Not, I'm sorry. Not, that must have hurt. Just, that's why I like you." Like my pain was a trait, a trophy he could admire. I should have known then. But when you've been broken long enough, you start believing that maybe someone admiring your cracks is the same as someone trying to heal them. It wasn't. He never tried to heal me. He tried to reshape me into what he wanted, into someone louder, someone funnier, someone easier to explain to his friends. He'd say, "Babe, why do you always think so much? Can't you just chill? God, you're so dramatic sometimes." And slowly, piece by piece, I stopped speaking. I stopped dreaming out loud. I stopped telling him things. Because what's the point of opening your soul to someone who only looks inside to rearrange the furniture? But I still stayed. Because I thought, if I just loved him more, maybe he'd stop trying to change me. He didn't. It started with the little things. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The way he'd laugh louder when someone else spoke, but fall quiet when I did. The way he'd post everyone on his stories. Except me. He said he liked keeping things private. Said we were above all that validation. I believed him. Because love makes you blind, but trying to be loved makes you delusional. Soon, he stopped asking about my day. Or maybe I stopped answering. I'm not sure when the silence between us became louder than any conversation we ever had. But it did. And it stayed. I remember one night, I stood in front of the mirror and whispered, "Is this what love is supposed to feel like?" Because I felt smaller, duller, like a ghost haunting my own relationship. He didn't hit me. He didn't cheat. Not then, not yet. But he erased me with kindness, with excuses, with carefully chosen words that made it look like I was the problem. "You're just too sensitive. Why do you always twist things? I'm trying so hard, but you make it impossible to love you sometimes." So I twisted myself into a shape he could hold. Smaller, softer, quieter. I stopped wearing the things I liked because he said I looked too withdrawn in black. I changed my hair because he said straight hair looked too intense. I laughed more, even when I didn't feel like it, because he said I was always too serious. And every time I compromised, I disappeared a little more. But the final blow didn't come with shouting or slamming doors. It came with a whisper, one I heard accidentally. He was talking to his friend on the phone. Thought I was asleep. "She's sweet, bro, but so damn heavy. Always in her head. I just wish she'd be a little more normal sometimes. You know? Normal." That word hit harder than any scream ever could. Because for the first time, I realized he didn't love me. He loved the idea of me. The tragic girl. The broken masterpiece. The quiet one who made him feel like a hero for staying. But I wasn't a project. I wasn't an aesthetic. I wasn't his redemption. And that night, something inside me cracked. Not the kind of crack that begs to be filled. The kind that burns. That night, I didn't cry. I just lay there beside him, his arm draped over me like ownership, and stared at the ceiling as his words replayed in my mind. She's sweet, but so damn heavy. I wish she'd be a little more normal. He wanted a paper doll, easy to fold, easier to throw away. But I wasn't paper. I was flint. And without realizing it, he just struck the match. For weeks after that, I said nothing. But I watched everything. I watched how he came home later. How his phone was always face down. I watched how he rolled his eyes when I spoke. How his compliments grew colder, more mechanical. How his patience was no longer patient, just laced with tired sighs and half-hearted shrugs. And the worst part? He thought I didn't notice. Because I stayed quiet. Because I smiled. Because I let him believe I was still the girl desperate to be loved. But what he didn't realize was the girl he had spent months tearing down. She was gone. What lay beside him now was not a girl begging for affection. It was something else. Something patient. Something dangerous. Every day, I started collecting pieces of my strength the way someone collects shattered glass, carefully, one slice at a time. I stopped asking where he was going. I stopped texting him long paragraphs about how I felt. He didn't deserve my thoughts anymore. Instead, I began investing in silence, because silence is power when it's intentional. I revisited every scar he tried to mold. And this time, I didn't hide them. I sharpened them. While he was out spinning his charming lies and empty promises, I was rebuilding myself with quiet fire. People say revenge is born in hate. They're wrong. Revenge is born in clarity, the moment you realize someone was never confused. They just never cared. And once you see that, once you really see it, you stop bleeding. And you start calculating. The funny thing about betrayal is, it doesn't destroy you instantly. It hollows you out slowly, quietly. Until one day you realize your heart isn't breaking anymore. It's planning. And that's what I did. While he slept beside me like I was still the same fool, I began shaping his downfall in the silence he thought was submission. I started small. I watched how he spoke, how he lied. Not to me, to others. To his friends. His coworkers. His clients. He was a mask made of charm and half-truths. A man so used to being adored, he never saw shadows creeping behind him. But I did. I made copies of everything he never bothered to protect. His passwords, his financials, his dirty little secrets tucked into hidden folders. Not to ruin him yet, no. That would be too kind. I needed to understand the man who thought he understood me. And the deeper I looked, the clearer it became. He wasn't just careless. He was cruel. He had another woman. Of course. Not a secret one, not a deep love affair. Just the backup. The filler. Someone he flirted with when I was too intense. Someone to remind him he still had options, in case I ever got too loud in my grief. He called her refreshing. He told her, she's so emotional. You're easy to be around. He was rehearsing my replacement while still holding my hand. And that's when I stopped feeling hurt. That's when I felt ready. Because heartbreak is one thing, but being steadied while you bleed, so someone else can benefit from your damage? That kind of cruelty deserves a different kind of answer. So I gave him one. I smiled more. I cooked for him. Listened to his stories. Agreed with his plans. I became the perfect echo, soft, quiet, predictable. He thought he'd won. Thought I was finally fixed. Thought I was the girl he'd designed from my ashes. But what he didn't know is that every word I spoke was laced with venom. Every soft laugh was timed. Every night I kissed him goodnight. I was kissing a man who had no idea that the life he thought was his was already being unraveled thread by thread. By the time he believed I was whole again, I had already buried the version of me who once begged for his love. He was living with a ghost, but not the kind that haunts. The kind that hunts. I didn't want to destroy him fast. Fast is mercy. I wanted to unravel him the way he unraveled me, quietly, elegantly, without warning. So I started where it would hurt most. His pride. He'd always seen me as beneath him. He wore my pain like a medal, proof of how good he was for saving me. So I gave him more chances to feel superior. I asked for advice I didn't need. I told him I couldn't make sense of numbers. Let him handle our finances. I let him believe he was the smart one, the capable one, the man behind our life's success. All the while, I was keeping records of every lie, every shady deal, every corner he'd cut at work. He ran a business. Small, but impressive on paper. What he didn't know, it was built on manipulation, unethical shortcuts, and silent threats. And I had proof of it all: screenshots, emails, bank transfers. A trail so perfect, it looked like he had created it. But I didn't stop there. I reached out to the girl he was seeing, the refreshing one. Not with anger, not to fight, but to thank her. I told her the truth, not as a victim, but as a warning. She didn't owe me loyalty, but she owed herself honesty. Turns out, she didn't know she was the backup. Didn't know he was stringing us both along. Didn't know the man who made her feel chosen had once made me feel the same way, right before discarding me like an afterthought. She broke. Not because of me, but because she saw herself in my story. That's how women get stronger, when they stop fighting each other over the scraps of a man who was never whole. So she joined me, not out of revenge, but out of respect for herself and for the girl I used to be. Together, we created the storm, a quiet, calculated, merciless storm. And as he walked around the world, smiling, lying, pretending to be the man who saved me, he had no idea the ground beneath him was already crumbling. Because the girl he broke was gone, and the woman in her place was about to turn his world into a maze he'd never escape. It started on a Thursday. He came home, humming like the world belonged to him, a loosened tie, smug grin, wine bottle in hand. He was celebrating some fake win at work, pretending to be the man who had it all under control. He didn't know that by the time he poured that wine, 3 of his biggest clients had already received anonymous dossiers, each one detailing shady practices he'd long buried, contracts forged, expenses manipulated, lies signed in ink, all traced back to him. By the weekend, the calls started. Confused voices, then angry ones, then silence. And I stayed calm. I made his coffee, kissed his cheek, sat across from him as he ranted about betrayal. "Someone's trying to destroy me," he said. He looked me straight in the eye, the same eyes he once called too intense, too emotional, and said, "Can you believe someone would do this to me?" I smiled. A soft, patient smile, the kind you give children when they finally learn a lesson you tried to teach them long ago. And still, he didn't see it. Still, he thought I was on his side. Because abusers never believe their victims can rise. They only know how to step on necks, not how to recognize queens standing up from the floor. But the world was already shifting. The woman he was seeing on the side, she had gone silent, ghosted him completely. What he didn't know was, she'd sent a letter to his board, with her story, with proof, with a voice she'd never used before, until I helped her find it. By Monday, the whispers became noise. By Tuesday, the board suspended him for ethics violations. And by Friday, the business he claimed to build with his brilliance collapsed like the fragile ego it was built on. He came home that night drunk, broken, shouting, called me a snake, a traitor, a curse, but I didn't flinch. I looked him in the eye, steady as stone, and whispered, "You should have known. When you made me silence myself, I wasn't becoming weak. I was learning your language." He raised his hand, paused, and for the first time, he didn't follow through. Because in that moment, he saw it. He saw me. Not the shattered girl he took in. Not the grieving, fragile thing he thought would never recover. He saw the storm, the reckoning, the ruin he built with his own hands. And now, it was mine to wield. After that night, something inside him snapped. He stopped pretending. No more suits. No more charm. No more carefully crafted lies. He became what he always was, desperate, broken, furious that the game had ended and he was no longer the one holding the board. He started staying out late, not with women this time, but with regret, drowning himself in bar stools and cheap conversations, searching for someone to blame who wasn't staring back in the mirror. And every night, he came home to the same thing. Me, calm, still, unbothered. He tried everything. Manipulation, guilt, even nostalgia. "I made one mistake," he whispered one night, gripping my wrist like that could hold together everything he'd shattered. "I lost everything. Isn't that punishment enough?" But he didn't just make one mistake. He made 1,000 little cuts. Called them love. Watched me bleed. He made me the punishment. And now, he was just living with the result. He stopped going out altogether. Paranoia settled in his bones. He thought everyone was watching him. The neighbors, the mailman, even the wind. Because when guilt wraps its fingers around your throat, you start seeing ghosts in every shadow. And the worst part? There was no evidence of my revenge. No fingerprints. No confessions. Everything had been clean, quiet, legal. I had simply exposed the truth he buried and let it destroy him the way his lies once destroyed me. The people who once praised him now whispered behind his back. The men who once admired him now avoided his gaze. And the women? They saw him for what he was, a mask that no longer fit. I never shouted, never broke, never begged him to see me. I simply let him sit in the silence he created until it screamed louder than any words ever could. He started locking himself in the study, mumbling to himself, trying to rewrite the story as if somewhere in his shattered memory, there was still a version where he came out clean. But there wasn't, because I hadn't just destroyed his name or his career. I had destroyed his illusion, the one where he was untouchable. And once a man realizes he's no longer the god in his own story, he becomes exactly what he feared most: ordinary. And in his case, forgotten. But I wasn't done yet. Because revenge doesn't always end with screams or fire. Sometimes, it ends with silence so thick, it becomes a mirror. And I was about to hold that mirror right in front of him, one last time. He didn't notice the suitcase at first. It was small, tucked near the door, like a secret waiting to be set free. He stood at the window again, curtains drawn halfway, watching the sky like it owed him something. The man who once told me I was nothing without him now looked like he couldn't survive 5 minutes alone with himself. I had taken nothing material from him. No money. No house. No legal war. What I took was everything he valued more: reputation, control, the illusion of being the hero. And I gave him something he never expected: time. Time to reflect. Time to drown in his own decay. Time to hear the echo of every lie he'd ever told bouncing off the walls he'd once ruled. Now, it was time for my final move. I walked in, calm, poised, silent. He turned. That same face, that same expression I once memorized in love, now burned into memory as a warning. He opened his mouth, maybe to plead, maybe to accuse. But I raised my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. And then, I spoke, not with anger, with clarity. You told me I was broken when you found me, that I needed fixing, that without you, I'd never survive. I stepped closer, and he flinched. Do you know what hurts most? Not what you did, but how deeply I believed you were my savior. My voice didn't shake. His eyes did. You didn't fall in love with me. You fell in love with control, with power, with the sound of my silence while I crumbled. He tried to respond, some pitiful apology about trauma, about misunderstanding, about how he had been hurting too. I let him finish, and then I whispered, "You couldn't understand me, so you made me the villain, forced me to become what you feared. And now," I turned toward the door, "you'll wake up every day with no one left to blame. Not even me." He panicked, reached out, tried to hold my wrist like he used to. But this time, I didn't pull away. I looked at his hand and gently pried his fingers off like they were dust on my sleeve. "No more begging," I said, with a softness that cut sharper than any scream. "No more playing God in a world that finally stopped worshiping you." He stood there, helpless, smaller than I'd ever seen him. And I realized something. He was never the strong one. He only looked strong next to the girl he broke. But the woman standing before him now? She was everything he tried to erase, and everything he could never become. I picked up my suitcase, paused at the door, and then delivered the final line, the one that would echo in his head long after I was gone. "You couldn't understand me, so you pushed me to become your ruin." But then, when I finally returned, I turned my head slowly, met his eyes one last time. Every road you could have taken had already turned to ash. And with that, I walked out, not with revenge in my heart, but peace in my steps. Because the best revenge is not watching them suffer. It's watching them realize they lost the only person who truly saw them, and knowing they'll never find that again.